Hello, my friend. I am truly glad that you have found your way back here tonight. The world outside is loud, isn't it? It is full of endless scrolling, bright lights, and demands that pull at your attention from every direction. But here, in this space we have created together, none of that matters. Before we take even a single step into the past, I want you to do something very important for yourself. I want you to acknowledge that you have done enough. You have made it through the day. The tasks are finished, or they can wait. The conversations are over. The noise has faded. Now, the time belongs only to you. Let us begin by finding the most comfortable position you can imagine. Perhaps you need to shift your shoulders slightly, letting them drop away from your ears. Perhaps you need to unclench your jaw, letting your tongue rest gently on the floor of your mouth. Feel the weight of the blanket pressing down on you. It is not just fabric, it is a shield, a soft, warm barrier that separates you from the worries of tomorrow. Take a deep breath in, filling your lungs with cool, calm air, and let it out slowly, pushing away the last bit of tension. Again, in and out. As you settle in, imagine that we are meeting in an ancient secret library. It is a room built of dark wood and stone, hidden away from the modern world. Outside, a heavy storm is passing. You can hear the rain tapping rhythmically against the tall glass windows. A steady, comforting drumbeat. Tap, tap, tap. The wind howls softly around the corners of the building, but it cannot reach you here. You are safe. In the center of the room, a large fireplace is crackling. The flames dance in shades of orange and deep red, casting long, gentle shadows across the rows of books. The air smells of old paper, leather bindings, and burning cedar wood. If this place brings you peace, and if you wish to help keep this sanctuary open for others who are also looking for rest, you can leave a small sign of your presence, a gentle tap on the like button, a subscription to join our circle, or a quiet comment below. These are simple actions, but they help these stories find their way through the digital noise to the people who need them most. Thank you for being part of this. Now, look at the table beside you. There lies a heavy book, bound in blue leather that looks like the surface of the deep sea. The title is embossed in gold. Atlantis. We open the cover. The pages are warm and soft. As we begin to read, the walls of the library dissolve. The fire fades into the glow of a primordial sun. The smell of cedar is replaced by the sharp, clean scent of salt and ozone. We are traveling back to the beginning, to a time when gods walked the earth and legends were born. To understand the end of Atlantis, we must first understand its beginning. And the beginning, like so many great tragedies in history, starts with a love affair that was perhaps ill-advised. Long before the continents took the shapes we know today, the world was divided among the three great brothers of Olympus. Zeus took the sky, filled with storms and lightning. Hades took the underworld, the realm of silence and shadows. And Poseidon took the sea. Imagine for a moment what it is like to be the lord of the ocean. You possess absolute power. You can summon hurricanes with a wave of your hand. You can shatter cliffs with your trident. You rule over a kingdom that covers most of the world, filled with strange, bioluminescent creatures and vast, silent trenches. But the ocean, for all its beauty, is a cold place. It is vast, deep, and terribly lonely. Poseidon was a god of turbulent emotions. He was as changeable as the tides, calm one moment, raging the next. And like many powerful beings who have everything, he was bored. He wandered the globe, riding his chariot drawn by golden-maned horses with bronze hooves, looking for something that would catch his interest. Something that wasn't just wet and blue. One day, his journey brought him to a solitary island in the middle of the great Atlantic Ocean. This was not just any island, it was a jewel. The texts describe it as a place where the earth was more generous than anywhere else. The sun seemed to linger there a little longer. The soil was rich and dark, and the forests were thick with trees that bore fruit unknown to modern man. But it wasn't the fruit or the trees that stopped the god of the sea. It was a girl. Her name was Cleito. She was mortal, the daughter of two humble earthborn people, Ivanor and Leucippe. Legend says she was more beautiful than the morning star, with eyes the color of the shallow sea. Poseidon saw her, and in that instant, the fate of the world shifted. Now, we must pause and appreciate the irony here. When a god falls in love, it is rarely a simple romance. Gods do not send flowers. They do not write poetry. They possess, they claim, and they tend to overreact. Poseidon did not just want to marry Cleito. He wanted to ensure that no one else could ever look at her again. He wanted to build her a home, yes, but he also wanted to build her a cage, a beautiful, golden, indestructible cage. It is funny in a way to think that the greatest civilization in human history, a city of advanced science, magic, and philosophy, did not begin as a project for the benefit of mankind. It began because a lonely god was jealous and wanted to keep his girlfriend safe. Cleito lived on a hill in the very center of the island, a gentle green hill overlooking the plains. Poseidon looked at this hill and decided that it was too accessible. It was too easy to reach. So he raised his trident. The sky turned dark, the earth trembled, and the great engineering project began. He did not build walls of stone. That would be too ordinary for a god. Instead, he decided to sculpt the island itself. He broke the land apart. He tore the earth from the bedrock. He created zones, rings. He carved out a great circle of water around the hill, isolating it completely. Then, a ring of land to enclose that water. Then another ring of water, wider than the first, and another ring of land. And finally, a third, massive ring of water that embraced it all. 5 rings in total, 2 of earth, 3 of water. Perfect circles, mathematically precise, as if drawn by a giant compass. At that time, there were no ships, there were no bridges. Cleito was now the queen of the most exclusive, protected sanctuary on earth. She was cut off from the world, surrounded by barriers of deep, swirling ocean that obeyed only her husband. It was a fortress built of nature itself. And there, in the center, on the lonely hill that was now an island within an island, Poseidon and Cleito began their life. The god brought up 2 springs of water from beneath the earth, one warm and steaming, the other cold and refreshing, so that his love would never know thirst or discomfort. The stage was set, the walls were up. But as we know, even the highest walls cannot keep out the slow, creeping nature of time. And so, the seed of Atlantis was planted, born from love, yes, but also born from a desire for absolute control. Now, I want you to hold that image in your mind. The perfect circles, the concentric rings of water and land radiating outward from the center like ripples in a pond frozen in time. It is easy to think of Atlantis as a city of marble and gold, because that is how it ended. But in the beginning, before the first brick was laid, it was something far more primal. It was a masterpiece of raw geology. Imagine the sheer power required to sculpt an island. We are not talking about bulldozers or cranes. We are talking about the will of a god. Poseidon struck the earth, and the rock obeyed. The cliffs rose up to block the northern winds, creating a natural shield so high that the clouds would snag on their peaks. The plains stretched out to the south, flat and green, basking in the eternal warmth. But the true beauty lay in the stone itself. The legends tell us that the rock of Atlantis was not uniform. It was striped with 3 distinct colors, quarried from the very bones of the earth. There was white stone, shimmering like the sea foam, blindingly bright under the noon sun. There was black stone, dark as the volcanic depths, absorbing the light, radiating strength and silence. And there was red stone, the color of dried blood or rusted iron, warm and vibrant. Later, the kings of Atlantis would use these stones to build their palaces, creating patterns of white, black and red that were pleasing to the eye. But for now, they were just raw cliffs, standing as silent sentinels over the empty rings of water. Let's descend for a moment into those rings. The outermost ring of water was vast. It was like a moat built for giants. The water there was deep, dark blue, connecting directly to the ocean. Then came a ring of land, then another ring of water, and another ring of land. And finally, the inner ring of water that hugged the central island. The water in these rings was not stagnant, because it was connected to the living ocean. It rose and fell with the tides, in and out. Twice a day, the water would breathe. Imagine standing on the central hill, looking out. You are completely surrounded by these barriers. To leave the island, you would have to cross water, then land, then water, then land, then water again. It was a labyrinth, a puzzle for Cleito, the mortal woman living in the center. This must have felt incredibly safe, or perhaps incredibly isolating. Silence reigned here. There were no ship's horns, no market chatter, only the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass and the cry of seabirds wheeling overhead. But Poseidon did not just give her rocks and water. He was a god of life, and he filled this sanctuary with abundance that borders on the magical. The soil of Atlantis was so rich that it could grow anything. Close your eyes and try to smell the air of that ancient time. It is heavy, with the scent of blooming flowers, wild orchids, jasmine, and plants that have no names in our modern languages. The forests were thick and ancient, and moving through these forests were animals of all kinds. The myths speak of great herds of elephants roaming the island. Picture that, these massive grey giants, moving slowly through the morning mist of Atlantis. They are the symbols of memory and wisdom. They walk silently on soft feet, their trunks plucking fruit from the trees. Even the wildest creatures were tame here, for there was no hunger to drive them to violence. The lakes and rivers were filled with fish. The marshes teemed with waterfowl. It was a closed ecosystem, a perfect terrarium. Everything was provided. If you were thirsty, the earth offered wine-dark grapes. If you were hungry, the trees offered sweet roots and nuts. If you were tired, the moss offered a bed softer than velvet. It was the Garden of Eden, but set in the middle of the dangerous ocean. And at the center of it all, oblivious to the rest of the suffering world, lived the lovers. It is said that in those early years, time moved differently in Atlantis. Without wars, without trade, without the need to work for survival, days blended into night, and years blended into centuries. It was a stillness that we can scarcely imagine today. A pause in history. The rings of stone stood firm. The water circulated endlessly. And the world outside continued to struggle, unaware that in the middle of the Atlantic, paradise had been found. But paradise, by its very nature, cannot remain empty forever. A garden without a gardener eventually becomes a wilderness. And so, the stillness of the lonely hill was broken by the sound of new life. The myths tell us that Poseidon and Cleito did not just have children, they founded a dynasty. And because this is a story of gods, nothing happened in small measures. 5 times Cleito gave birth, and 5 times she brought forth twin sons. 10 princes, 10 kings. Imagine the symmetry of it. Nature in Atlantis loved patterns, the circles of the land, the tides of the water, and now, the perfect duality of the royal line. The eldest of these 10 was named Atlas. Pause on that name for a moment. Atlas. It is a name that echoes through history. We often think of the Titan holding up the sky. But in this story, Atlas was the first king of the deep. It is from him that the vast ocean around us takes its name, the Atlantic. And the island itself, this jewel in the center of the world, was named Atlantis in his honor. Even today, thousands of years later, when we look at a map, we are speaking his name without even realizing it. Poseidon, being a god of order as much as a god of chaos, did not let his sons fight over scraps. He divided the island into 10 portions. Atlas, being the eldest, received the central island, the home of his mother, the hill of the sacred springs, and the largest, most fertile plains. He was the high king, the ruler to whom all others bowed. His twin brother was given the extremity of the island, the part facing the Pillars of Hercules, looking toward the lands we now call Spain. The Greeks called him Eumelus, but in the language of Atlantis, his name was Gadeirus. As these children grew, the island changed. It was no longer just a sanctuary for a lover. It was becoming a kingdom, but it was still a kingdom of absolute peace. The brothers did not quarrel. How could they? They had everything. The earth provided minerals in abundance. They dug into the cliffs and found not just stone, but copper and tin. They found silver that shone like the moon. And of course, they found more of that mysterious fire-red metal, Orichalcum. They began to build. This is the moment where nature meets civilization. They did not destroy the landscape. They enhanced it. They built bridges over the rings of water, connecting the separated zones. They built tunnels through the walls of rock so that ships could pass from the outer ocean all the way to the inner citadel. Imagine the scene: a ship sailing under a mountain, gliding through a torch-lit tunnel, and emerging into the secret, sunlit heart of the city. The abundance of the island seemed to grow with the population. The descriptions we have are incredibly specific. We are told of pulse, legumes, and fruits with hard rinds that provided both food and drink, perhaps the coconut, a fruit that would have seemed miraculous to the ancient Greeks. We are told of chestnuts and acorns, and fruits that decay quickly and must be eaten fresh. Every season brought a new harvest. The air was always filled with the sweet, heavy scent of ripening fruit. The 10 kings ruled over this bounty with a lightness of touch. They met in the center, in the temple of Poseidon, not to plot wars, but to celebrate festivals. They wore gold, but they did not hoard it. They had weapons, but they were ceremonial, used only for the hunt, never against each other. It was the dawn of what we now call the Golden Age. A time when humanity possessed the power of gods, but still retained the innocence of children. The hierarchy was established. The borders were drawn. The ocean was named. The lonely island had become a civilization. But as the sun sets on this first chapter of our story, we must ask ourselves a question. Can perfection last? When you have everything, what is left to desire? For now, the answer is silence. The kings are young, the stone is bright, and the ocean is calm. Let us rest in this moment of perfect balance before the wheel of fate begins to turn. Now, let us walk through the gates of the city itself. We have spoken of the rocks and the trees, but the true marvel of Atlantis was not what grew on the ground, but what the people built upon it. In our modern world, we associate great cities with noise, with grey concrete, and with the heavy smog of industry. We think of technology as something cold, something that hums and vibrates with electricity. But Atlantis was different. It was a civilization of high science that looked, to the untrained eye, indistinguishable from magic. The architects of the Golden Age did not build to conquer nature. They built to reflect it. They constructed 3 great walls to protect the concentric rings. The outermost wall, the one guarding the perimeter, was covered in brass. When the sun hit it, it shone with a sharp, bright yellow light, like a shield of solid sunlight. The inner wall, the one protecting the second ring of land, was covered in tin. At night, under the moon, it gleamed with a soft, silvery light, cool and liquid like the surface of a calm lake. But the third wall, the wall that surrounded the central citadel, the holy heart of the empire, that was something else entirely. It was clad in Orichalcum. Orichalcum. The word itself tastes ancient. We do not know exactly what it was. Some say it was an alloy of copper and gold. Others say it was a crystal found deep in the volcanic veins of the earth. But we know what it looked like. The ancient texts say it flashed with the red light of fire. Imagine a metal that seems to hold a flame trapped inside it. It doesn't just reflect light, it seems to generate it. At twilight, when the blue of the ocean deepened into black, the center of Atlantis did not go dark. Instead, it began to glow. A warm, amber-red pulse radiated from the very walls. It was not the harsh, buzzing glare of neon lights. It was a soft, biological luminescence, like the embers of a dying fire, or the light of 1,000 candles trapped in glass. Living in Atlantis during this time must have felt like living inside a precious jewel. There was no soot, no smoke. The Atlanteans had mastered forces we have forgotten. They didn't burn coal to heat their water. They channeled the heat of the earth itself. They didn't use wires to carry messages. They used the resonance of crystals, vibrations that traveled through the air like a song. Imagine walking home in this city. You are walking across a bridge made of white marble. Below you, the black water of the canal reflects the red glow of the Orichalcum walls. The air is warm, kept stable by the geothermal currents. The statues lining the bridge, statues of nereids riding dolphins, seem to move in the flickering light. Everything is silent. The technology of Atlantis was silent. There were no engines, only the wind, the water, and the soft hum of energy. This was the science of magic. It was the understanding that light, sound, and stone are all forms of the same thing. The people here did not fear the dark, because there was no true darkness in the Golden Age. There was only the sun by day, and the gentle, fiery embrace of the city by night. It was a womb of light, a place where a human being could feel completely, utterly protected from the cold void of the universe. As you lie here tonight, imagine that red glow, warm, steady, pulse after pulse. It is the heartbeat of a civilization at its peak. It is a light that says, you are home, you are safe, rest now.
In the very center of the city, surrounded by the glowing wall of Orichalcum, stood the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Temple of Poseidon. If the city was a body, this temple was its soul. And it was here that the true nature of Atlantis was revealed. A mix of sophisticated beauty and ancient raw power. The temple was not difficult to find. It dominated the skyline. It was a stadium of a building, a stadium for the gods. The texts tell us it was a star in length, 600 feet and 300 feet wide. It rose into the sky with a proportionality that felt not quite Greek, not quite Egyptian, but something older, something barbaric in its splendor. The exterior was entirely covered in silver, so that when the moon hit it, the building seemed to disappear into the starlight. Only the pinnacles, the highest points of the roof, were dipped in gold, catching the first rays of the morning sun before it touched the rest of the world. Let us push open the heavy doors. They are made of golden bronze, and they swing open with a deep, resonant sound that vibrates in your chest. Boom! Stepping inside, your breath is taken away by the scale. You look up. The ceiling is not stone. It is a mosaic of ivory, the tusks of thousands of elephants polished to a white shine, and inlaid into this ivory are veins of gold and silver, creating a map of the heavens. It is a sky made of bone and precious metal, but your eyes are drawn down to the center of the room. There stands the god. The statue of Poseidon was so large that his head brushed the ivory clouds of the ceiling. He was standing in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. Around him, in a circle, 100 nereids rode on the backs of dolphins. The statue was made of pure gold. Imagine the amount of gold, mountains of it. It reflected the light of the fires that burned eternally on the altars, filling the room with a liquid, shifting yellow haze. This was not a quiet church for silent prayer. This was a house of power. The air here smelled of frankincense, heavy and sweet, and faintly of the sea. It was here, in this golden cavern, that the 10 kings of Atlantis gathered every 5th and 6th year. This is where the story touches upon something ancient and strange. The kings did not come here to rule. They came to be judged. In the center of the temple stood a pillar of Orichalcum. On this pillar, the laws of the first days were inscribed. But the ritual was wild. There were bulls roaming freely within the temple precinct, sacred beasts, strong and untouched. When the 10 kings gathered, they left their iron weapons outside. They entered the sacred ground alone, carrying only wooden staves and ropes. No sharp edges, no metal. They had to hunt the bull with their bare hands and simple tools. It was a test, a reminder that even a king is just a man in the face of nature. A reminder that civilization is just a thin layer over the primal world. Once the bull was caught and the sacrifice was made, in a manner we shall leave to the shadows of history, the kings would gather around a great bowl of wine. They would take a drop of the sacred blood and mix it with the wine. They would pour a libation onto the fire, and as the flames rose, they would swear an oath. Imagine 10 powerful men dressed in robes of the darkest sea blue, standing in the flickering golden light. They swore to never destroy one another. They swore to help one another if any city tried to rise against the royal house. They swore that the High King, the descendant of Atlas, was the supreme voice, and then they would drink from cups of gold and cast the cups into the fire, never to be used again. Night would fall over the temple. The fire would die down to embers. The kings would sit on the ground, wrapped in magnificent dark blue robes, in the ashes of the sacrifice. And there, in the darkness, judging and being judged, they would govern the world. It was a scene of absolute solemnity, a mix of the highest refinement and the deepest, oldest superstition. This was the heart of the Golden Age, a balance between the law written on the pillar and the wild bull roaming the sanctuary. As long as they respected this balance, as long as they feared the oath, Atlantis remained eternal. But oaths are words, and words, like stone, can weather with time. Let us leave them there, sitting in the blue dark, and step back out into the cool, fresh air of the night. The city sleeps, the red walls glow, and for now, the oath holds. Let us step away from the heavy, incense-filled air of the temple and walk down into the residential rings. It is easy to imagine the kings, but what about the people? What was it like to wake up in Atlantis on a regular Tuesday morning during the Golden Age? The first thing you must understand is that the concept of time was different for them. In our world, time is a predator. It chases us. We have alarms, schedules, deadlines. We are constantly worried about being late. But in Atlantis, time was a river. You floated on it. The people here lived for centuries. The myths speak of Atlanteans retaining their youth well into their second 100 years. When you know you have 300 years of life ahead of you, there is no need to rush your breakfast. Work existed, but it was not labor. It was art. A stonemason did not cut rock just to build a wall. He cut it to reveal the beauty inside the stone. A weaver did not make cloth just to cover the body. She wove fabrics from the wool of the sea, byssus that shimmered like fish scales and felt like water against the skin. Nobody worked for money because gold was used for paving streets, not for buying bread. Imagine a society where your value is not determined by your bank account, but by the quality of your conversation and the kindness of your heart. It sounds impossible to us, but to them, we would have seemed impossible. And this brings us to a slightly amusing thought. The Atlanteans knew about the rest of the world. Their ships traveled to the coasts of Africa, to the primitive settlements of Europe, and even to the great expanse of the Americas. But they did not visit these places to conquer. Not yet. They visited them like a biologist visits a forest. To them, the ancestors of the Greeks and the Egyptians were quaint. They looked at our mud huts, our petty tribal wars, and our short, frantic lives with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Look at them, an Atlantean might say, watching a group of early humans arguing over a piece of land. So loud, so hurried, so wonderfully primitive. There is a gentle arrogance in paradise. When you live in heaven, everywhere else looks like a campsite. But the true magic of their daily life was their connection to the natural world. We build zoos to look at animals. The Atlanteans lived inside the zoo. The canals of the city were not filled with dirty, stagnant water. They were crystal clear, fed by the ocean tides. It was common to see children playing on the steps of the harbour, splashing water at passing dolphins, and the dolphins splashed back. The legends say the Atlanteans understood the language of the sea creatures, perhaps not in words and grammar, but in intent. They knew when a storm was coming because the seabirds told them. They knew where the fish were running because the whales sang of it. They did not feel like a separate species, divorced from nature. They felt like the older siblings of the animal kingdom, wise, protective, and deeply connected. Imagine ending your day in such a place. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in violet and rose. You sit on the terrace of your home, overlooking the calm water of the second ring. You eat a simple meal of fresh fruit and bread, drinking wine that tastes of the volcanic earth. Around you, the city begins to glow as the Orichalcum walls catch the fading light. The air is warm. The conversation is slow. There is no fear of tomorrow, no fear of bills, no fear of war, just the sound of laughter floating across the water and the rhythmic breathing of the ocean in and out. It was a life of such profound harmony that it feels like a dream to us now. But dreams, as we know, must eventually end. Waking up is inevitable, and as the centuries passed, the very thing that made Atlantis so beautiful, its comfort, its wealth, its isolation, began to poison it. For even in paradise, the human heart remains a complicated thing. We have seen the height of the glory. Now, we must prepare ourselves to witness the slow, tragic turning of the tide. But not yet. For this moment, just for tonight, let the city glow. Let the dolphins play. Let the golden age last a few minutes longer in your mind. Rest in this perfection. It is said that a drop of poison in a barrel of wine is invisible, yet it changes the taste of the whole. And so it was with Atlantis. The fall of this great civilization did not begin with an earthquake. It did not begin with a wave. Those were merely the final punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. The fall began much earlier, in the silence of the blood. For many generations, the kings and the people of Atlantis remained obedient to the laws of Poseidon. They possessed a divine nature. They were gentle in their dealings with one another, and they despised everything but virtue. They cared little for their gold, treating it as a burden rather than a treasure. They were not intoxicated by luxury, nor did they lose control of themselves. They were sober in the midst of plenty, but time is a relentless solvent. As the centuries turned into millennia, the divine portion within them began to fade. It became diluted, mixed again and again with the mortal nature. The god died out in them, and the human rose up. And the human nature, for all its creativity and passion, is flawed. It is driven by an unquenchable thirst. When you have a perfect life, strange things begin to happen to the mind. Peace, if it lasts too long, can start to feel like boredom. Safety can start to feel like stagnation. The Atlanteans began to feel an itch, a restlessness. They looked at their beautiful white and black stones, and they no longer saw beauty. They saw real estate. They looked at the Orichalcum walls, and they no longer saw a source of light. They saw a vault of immense value that needed to be guarded. This corruption was insidious because it was slow. A king would decide to expand his palace, not because he needed the space, but because he wanted it to be larger than his brothers. A merchant would start to hoard the wool of the sea, creating artificial scarcity to drive up the price. Why? They didn't need the money. It was simply for the thrill of keeping score. The gatherings in the temple of Poseidon changed. The rituals were still performed. The bulls were still hunted without iron weapons. The oaths were still spoken over the dying fire. But the hearts of the men standing in the darkness had shifted. They no longer looked at each other as brothers zound by a sacred duty. They looked at each other as rivals. The heavy blue robes concealed daggers of suspicion. Outwardly, the city appeared more glorious than ever. This is the great irony of the decline. As their spirits rotted, their buildings grew taller. They added more gold, more statues, more grand harbors. To a visitor arriving by ship, Atlantis in its late stage would have looked stunning, the pinnacle of wealth and power. But Zeus, who has the eye to see these things, saw that the race was no longer good. He saw that they were suffering from a sickness of the soul, hubris, arrogance. They began to believe that they were the source of their own greatness. They forgot the ocean. They forgot the gift. They began to say, "We built this," instead of, "We received this." And when a civilization forgets gratitude, it becomes dangerous. The walls of the concentric rings, once built to keep the storms out, were now used to keep their treasures in. The isolation, once a source of peace, became a breeding ground for a strange superiority complex. They looked out at the rest of the world, at the mud huts of Europe and Africa, and they no longer felt pity or curiosity. They felt contempt. "Why should we stay here on our island?" they whispered in their golden councils. "We are the masters of the earth. We have the technology. We have the strength. Why should we not rule it all?" And so, the shepherd kings became the tyrant kings. The dream of paradise turned into a dream of empire, and the world, which had been sleeping quietly while Atlantis shined, was about to wake up to a nightmare coming from the west. And so, the isolation ended. The rings of water, once designed to keep the world out, now opened to let the fleets of Atlantis out. This is the part of the legend that is often forgotten. We like to remember Atlantis as a victim of nature, a tragic loss. But the ancient priests of Egypt, who kept the records of this time, told a different story. They did not remember Atlantis as a lost paradise. They remembered it as a terror, a shadow that rose from the sea to devour the light. Imagine the scale of the invasion. The texts speak of 1,200 ships. 1,200. In the ancient world, a fleet of 50 ships was considered an armada. 1200 was a moving continent. They sailed out of the mist of the Atlantic. Their sails dyed purple and crimson, their hulls plated with bronze that shone in the sun. It must have looked like the ocean itself was rising up to consume the land. They did not come to trade. They came to enslave. They swept through the pillars of Hercules, the straits we now call Gibraltar, and poured into the Mediterranean Sea like a flood. They took the islands first, then they took the coasts of North Africa, marching all the way to the borders of Egypt. They took Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, modern Italy. It was a campaign of absolute dominance. The kings of Atlantis, clad in their golden armor, walked through the lands of primitive men like gods walking among insects. They believed nothing could stop them. They had the magic of Orichalcum. They had the strength of Poseidon. They had the arrogance of centuries of peace. But history has a way of surprising even the most powerful. As the Atlantean tide rolled eastward, swallowing city after city, it finally crashed against a rock it could not move. It was not a great empire. It was not a land of gold. It was a small, rocky peninsula, the land of ancient Athens. Now, you must wipe from your mind the image of the Athens you know, the white Parthenon, the philosophers in togas. That Athens came thousands of years later. This was old Athens, a city of warriors who lived close to the earth. They did not have the high technology of Atlantis. They did not have glowing walls or heating systems. But they had something else. They had a spirit that was forged in hardship, not in luxury. While the other nations surrendered, terrified by the size of the Atlantean ships, the Athenians stood alone. The allies fell away. The neighbors fled into the hills. But the warriors of the goddess Athena did not run. Imagine the contrast. On one side, the golden army of the West, drunk on power, confident in their invincibility, marching in perfect unison. On the other side, the men of the rocky earth, holding simple spears, standing in silence on their hills. It was the ultimate battle of the ancient world, the wave against the rock, luxury against virtue, the arrogance of the god-kings against the grit of free men. We do not have the details of the battles, the clash of bronze, the dust, the shouts. Those sounds have faded into the silence of time, but we know the outcome. Against all odds, the sheer will of the Athenians broke the spirit of the invaders. The Atlanteans, who had never known defeat, who had never known what it was to bleed for something real, panicked. Their formation shattered. The great fleet turned back. The masters of the world were humiliated by a people they deemed primitive. They retreated. The ships that had sailed out with such pride now limped back toward the setting sun, carrying the wounded vanity of 10 kings. They returned to their concentric rings, to their glowing walls and their ivory temples. But the air in the city had changed. The illusion of their godhood was broken. They were just men. Vulnerable, defeatable men. And as they retreated behind their walls, locking the gates, they did not know that their defeat on the battlefield was only the beginning. For up on Mount Olympus, the true owner of the world had seen enough. The war was over, but the judgment was just beginning. The silence that fell over Atlantis that night was not the peace of sleep. It was the silence of a held breath, the calm before the final, absolute end. While the defeated fleets of Atlantis limped back across the sea, licking their wounds, a different kind of gathering was taking place far above the clouds. The ancient myths speak of Mount Olympus not merely as a mountain of snow and rock, but as the most honorable habitation. It is the control center of the universe, the place from which the order of all things is watched. Zeus, the king of kings, stood there. In the surviving fragments of Plato's text, the story breaks off exactly at this moment. It stops mid-sentence, just as Zeus prepares to speak. But tonight, in the quiet of our imagination, we can finish that sentence. We can witness what happened in that silence. Zeus is often painted by artists with a thunderbolt in his hand, his face twisted in rage. But the Zeus of this story is different. He is the architect. He is the one who sees the beginning and the end. He looked down at the earth. He saw the famous race of Atlantis, once so noble, so filled with light, now burdened with unrighteous greed and power. He saw a beautiful structure that had become rotten at its foundation, and he knew, with the cold logic of a god, that it could not be fixed. It could only be removed. It is a heavy thing to end a world, even for a god. It requires a decision that vibrates through the very fabric of reality. He sent out a summons. It was not a shout. It was a pulse. A call that traveled instantly to the farthest corners of the cosmos. The gods gathered. They came from the deep ocean, rising from the foam. They came from the underworld, stepping out of the shadows. They came from the sun and the moon. They entered the great hall of Olympus, walking on floors of cloud and starlight. Imagine the silence of that room. These are beings who have lived for eons. They do not chatter. They do not gossip. They stood in a circle, their presence heavy and radiant, waiting for the word of the king. Zeus spoke. His voice was not loud, but it was deep. It resonated in the chest of every living thing, though no human on earth could hear it. He spoke of the law. He spoke of balance. He explained that Atlantis had become a cancer. It had taken the gifts of the gods, the rich soil, the perfect climate, the magic of Orichalcum, and used them to enslave the weak. They had forgotten that they were guests on this planet. Chastisement is necessary, he said, not to destroy them out of hate, but to bring the world back into harmony, to teach mankind that there are limits. The decision was made. There was no vote. There was no debate. The other gods simply bowed their heads in assent. Even Poseidon, the father of the island, the one who had carved the rings of stone with his own trident for the love of a mortal woman, even he stood silent. He knew. He had felt the corruption in the water. He had felt his own children turning away from the sea to worship their own reflections. He lowered his trident, a gesture of release. He was letting them go. The council ended. The gods departed, fading back into the elements. Zeus remained alone on the peak, looking down at the tiny, glowing jewel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. From this height, the Orichalcum walls still looked beautiful. The ships in the harbor looked like toys. The people down there were feasting. They were celebrating their survival, telling themselves lies about their greatness, unaware that the verdict had already been passed. The sky above Atlantis began to change. Not quickly, but slowly. The stars seemed to pull back, retreating into the black. The air grew heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on one's arms stand up. It was the heavy, suffocating stillness of a held breath. The universe was pausing, waiting for the exhale. Down in the city, the music played on. The wine flowed. The lights burned bright. They had one night left. One final night of luxury and blindness before the morning that would never come. Let us leave them to their feast for a moment longer. Let us step back into the shadows and prepare ourselves for the end. For when the gods move, they do not move like men. They move like nature itself, absolute, indifferent, and final. Let us descend one last time from the silent peaks of Olympus back to the warm, bustling streets of the city. It was night in Atlantis. If you were walking along the harbor that evening, you would not have known that the world was about to end. In fact, the city had never seemed more alive. The retreating fleet had returned, and though they had been defeated in Athens, the propaganda of the kings had turned the story into a stalemate. "We are safe behind our rings," they said. "The ocean protects us," and the people believed them. The great banqueting halls were filled with light. Torches soaked in perfumed oil burned brightly, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls of red and black stone. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meats, sweet spices, and heavy wine. Musicians played flutes made of silver and lyres made of tortoise shell. Laughter floated out of the open windows and drifted over the dark water of the canals. It was the sound of a civilization that had forgotten how to be afraid. They toasted to their ancestors. They toasted to their wealth. They toasted to the eternal glory of Atlantis. There is a profound sadness in watching a celebration when you know the outcome. Every laugh sounds brittle. Every boast sounds hollow. But if the people were blind, the earth was not. Those who were paying attention, the few old souls who still remembered the old ways, might have noticed that something was wrong. The animals knew first. The great herds of elephants, usually so calm, were restless. They paced in their enclosures, their trunks testing the air, their low rumbles vibrating with anxiety. The seabirds that usually nested on the cliffs had vanished. The sky was empty. Even the dolphins, the friends of the city, had swum out to the deep ocean, leaving the harbor strangely quiet. Nature was holding its breath. The air pressure dropped. It became heavy, oppressive. A strange electric static filled the atmosphere, making the silk robes of the nobles cling to their skin. It was what sailors call earthquake weather, that eerie stillness where the world seems to be waiting for a signal. In the central palace, the High King stood on his balcony. He held a goblet of gold encrusted with emeralds. He looked out over his city. He saw the glowing rings of Orichalcum. He saw the bridges. He saw the lights reflecting in the water. He felt a surge of pride. "This is mine," he thought, "and it will stand for 1,000 years." He did not see the violet sky above him. He did not feel the subtle vibration that was beginning to hum deep within the bedrock of the island. He took a sip of wine. It was the last taste of sweetness he would ever know. The clock of destiny ticked its final second. The protection of Poseidon, which had held the tectonic plates in balance for so long, was withdrawn. The release was silent. It started with a sound that was not quite a sound. It was a sensation, a drop. Have you ever been in an elevator that descends too quickly? That sudden lurch in your stomach? Imagine that sensation, but felt by an entire island. The wine in the king's cup rippled. The music in the hall faltered for a beat. The laughter stopped. People looked at each other, their eyes wide, asking a silent question. What was that? For a moment, there was absolute silence. And then, from the depths of the earth, from the very roots of the world, came a groan. A deep, grinding roar that was louder than thunder, louder than war. The party was over. The payment was due.
The end of Atlantis was not an explosion, it was a collapse. The ancient texts say it happened in a single day and night of misfortune. But those words cannot capture the sheer physical reality of the event. Imagine the sound of the earth cracking open, not the sharp crack of a whip, but the deep, low-frequency tearing of bedrock, a sound you feel in your bones more than you hear with your ears. The foundation of the island, which had held firm for thousands of years, simply gave way. The ground did not shake back and forth. It turned into liquid. The great white bridges, masterpieces of engineering, snapped like dry twigs. The stone arches crumbled, sending clouds of marble dust into the night air, ghost white against the dark sky. Then came the water. It came from everywhere at once. The ocean surged over the outer rings, a wall of black water moving with terrifying speed. But water also burst from below. The sacred springs of Poseidon, the hot and the cold, erupted into geysers, flooding the central hill from the inside out. The element that the Atlanteans loved the most, the element they had worshipped and mastered, turned against them. The concentric rings, designed to be a protective embrace, became a trap. The water filled the zones one by one. First the outer harbour, then the merchant ring, then the ring of the warriors. It was a systematic extinguishing of the lights. This is the image I want you to see. The battle between fire and water. As the ocean rushed into the inner citadel, it met the walls. Orichalcum. The metal was hot, glowing with its eternal red pulse. The water was cold. When they touched, the sound was a hiss that screamed across the sky. Shh! Great plumes of white steam rose up, swallowing the city in a thick fog. The red glow flickered, struggled, and then died. Zone by zone, the city of light was plunged into darkness. The fires on the altars were quenched. The torches in the halls were drowned. The only light left was the jagged flash of lightning from the violet clouds above. illuminating the destruction in brief, strobe-like glimpses. The High King on his balcony watched his world disappear. He saw his fleet, the pride of the empire, being tossed like toys in a bathtub. He saw the great statues of the ancestors toppling into the rising waves. There was no time for bargains, no time for prayers. The gods were no longer listening. The gravity of the descent took over. The island began to slide. It was heavy, laden with gold, stone, and hubris. It wanted to go down. The sensation was one of overwhelming weight pulling everything toward the bottom. Down, down, down. The central hill, the palace, the temple of Poseidon. All of it sank beneath the surface of the churning Atlantic. The transition was violent, yet strangely majestic. One moment, there was a civilization, a place of music, philosophy, and arrogance. The next moment, there was only a vortex, a massive, swirling whirlpool of foam and debris spinning in the dark ocean. The sea rushed in to fill the void where the land had been. It collided with itself, creating chaotic waves that radiated out for hundreds of miles. And then, the spinning slowed. The foam settled. The waves smoothed out. The storm clouds broke apart, revealing the indifferent stars. The ocean returned to its flat, endless horizon. It looked exactly as it had at the beginning of time, as if nothing had happened, as if no one had ever lived there. The surface was silent, but below, in the deep, the journey was not over. The city was falling, falling through the blue, falling through the black, drifting slowly toward the sandy floor of the world. The fall is over. The city has reached its final resting place. It sits now on the floor of the Atlantic, miles beneath the surface where the storms rage. Down here, there is no weather. There is no wind. There is no day and no night. There is only the eternal twilight of the deep. The sediment has settled. The water is clear again. Let us drift through the streets of the lost capital. One last time. It is the most peaceful place on earth. The great walls of Orichalcum, which once glowed like fire, are dark now. But they are not invisible. They catch the faint, blue bioluminescence of the deep sea creatures that float past like living stars. The metal is cold, preserved by the salt and the pressure. Walk, or rather float, down the main avenue. The water holds you. It embraces you. You are weightless here, light as a feather, free from the pull of gravity that weighs down the world above. The silence is absolute. It is a thick, velvet silence that wraps around every stone. Look at the houses of the nobility. The doors are open, swaying gently in the slow current. Inside, the furniture is gone, dissolved by time, but the structures remain. A school of silver fish swims in perfect unison through a marble window, crosses the living room, and exits through the chimney. They do not know that this was once a place of politics and passion. To them, it is just a reef, a complex, beautiful cave made of stone,
Nature does not mourn the loss of civilization, it simply adopts it. Swim toward the temple of Poseidon. The roof of ivory has collapsed in places, allowing us to see inside. The great golden statue of the god standing in his chariot is still there. Gold does not rust. It does not decay. He stands tall in the darkness, his hand raised, but he is no longer commanding the waves. He is covered in a soft blanket of marine snow. Barnacles have attached themselves to the wheels of his chariot, decorating the gold with patterns of white and grey. A large octopus, intelligent and slow, has made its home between the feet of the god. It moves its tentacles lazily, touching the ancient gold without greed, without awe. The floor, once polished to a mirror shine, is now a carpet of soft sand. Seaweed grows from the cracks in the tiles, tall and green, swaying back and forth, back and forth. It looks like a forest in a dream, moving in slow motion. There is no conflict here anymore. The arguments of the kings, the shouts of the warriors, the cries of the merchants, it has all been swallowed by the water. The pressure of the ocean presses down on everything, holding it in place. It feels like a heavy blanket tucked around a sleeping child. Nothing moves quickly here. To move quickly is to fight the water, and nothing fights down here. Everything flows. The statues of the ancient heroes, the ones who fought the wars, now stand guard over empty squares. Their stone eyes look out into the blue dark. They look peaceful, as if they are relieved that the struggle is finally over. They do not have to hold up the sky anymore. The water holds it for them. This is the secret beauty of the ruins. When we think of destruction, we think of pain. But time turns destruction into art. Atlantis has become a museum that no one visits. A gallery of silence. The gold is still there. The emeralds are still there, scattered in the sand like glitter. But they have no value now. There is no one to buy, and no one to sell. The gold has returned to the earth. It is just metal again, shiny, cold, and quiet. There is a profound sense of release in this. To lose everything is also to be free of everything. The city has been absolved of its sins. The hubris is gone. The war is forgotten. Only the shape remains, a ghost of geometry in the deep. Drift higher now. Look down at the circles. You can still see the rings. The ring of land, the ring of water, the ring of land, the ring of water. They look like a giant eye staring up at the surface, but the eye is closed. It is sleeping. It has been sleeping for 10,000 years, and it will sleep for 10,000 more. The ocean is a patient caretaker. It covers the mistakes of the past and keeps them safe in the dark. Rest here for a moment. Feel the imaginary water around you. Cool, heavy, protective. You are as safe as the golden statue in the temple. Nothing can reach you. The noise of the world is miles away, muffled by the crushing, comforting weight of the sea. just silence, just the slow, rhythmic pulse of the current, drifting, floating, sleeping. And so, our journey to the ancient world is complete. We have witnessed the rise of the rings, the glow of the Golden Age, the pride of the kings, and the final, silent descent into the deep. But as we leave the ruins behind, fading back into the blue mist of memory, there is one last thought I want you to carry with you. Atlantis is gone, yes. The maps show only open water, but in a way, it has never truly left us. We remember it because we need it. Every human being carries a map of Atlantis inside their own heart. It is the symbol of that deep, perfect rest we are all searching for. A place where the walls are strong, where the water is warm, and where the outside world cannot touch us. Tonight, you have found that place. You do not need to dive to the bottom of the Atlantic to find peace. You have built it right here, in this bed, in this room, in this moment. Your breathing is the tide, in and out. Your heavy eyelids are the gates of the sanctuary, closing for the night. Your mind is the calm, dark ocean, vast and silent. You are the keeper of your own quiet kingdom. Before you drift away completely, while you are still hovering on the edge of this gentle darkness, I invite you to make a small promise to yourself. If this story, this quiet voice, and this journey help you find a moment of stillness in a chaotic world, then you are always welcome here. You can help build this library of dreams with a simple touch. A like, a subscription, or a quiet word to say you are here. These small signals are like lighthouses in the dark digital sea. They help other weary travelers find their way to this safe harbor. But that is for another time, for tomorrow. Right now, nothing matters but the silence. Feel the story dissolving. The red glow of the Orichalcum fades into a soft, comfortable black. The sound of the temple chants fades into the rhythm of your own heart. The weight of the history lifts off your shoulders, leaving you light, floating, free. You are no longer listening to a story about the past. You are drifting into your own future, a future of deep, restorative sleep. Let your body sink deeper into the mattress. Let every muscle turn to water. Let every thought turn to mist. I will count you down now, from 5 to 1. And with each number, the lost city will drift further away, and sleep will come closer. 5. The rings of stone are still. The water is smooth. 4. The lights are out. The ocean is dark and protective. 3. Your body is heavy, so heavy, so relaxed. 2. The silence is absolute. You are safe. 1. Let go. The ocean holds you. The night holds you. Sleep is here. Good night, my friend. Good night, Atlantis. Good night.